This is the Hindsight 20 podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jerry Mallory. It was Monday Night Football. I'm sure the TV execs and ESPN and ABC, the Disney company, Mike Tirico and John Gruden weren't particularly thrilled, although Tirico maybe, being a local guy, weren't particularly thrilled that these two teams were facing off. Be that as they were under 500, no aspirations for winning their division or making the playoffs. Yet and still, the locals here in Michigan and Metro Detroit area, as well as in Louisiana, certainly, no matter what, we're tuned in, and our Lions were able to pull this one off. Pretty good game. Overall, we have tons to talk about, so let's set the table before we get any further talking about this game, seeing how this impacted the draft, before we talk about the San Francisco 49ers, and we'll even have a guest on. Let's take care of some business. DetroitSportsPodcast.com, as always, is where we can be found. If you're a fan of iTunes, that's good. You probably have an Apple phone. So go ahead with your iTunes and download Detroit Sports Podcast and subscribe. And then for those with Android, I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, I like to use Podbay for what we do here. Not just for our show, for all of the different podcasts that I listen to. I like to listen to a lot of different ones. And it's becoming, it's just like the internet, okay? With local television or just regular television, even cable television, you're kind of forced to watch what they gave you. And so certain times during the week, certain days of the week, it would be special. It would be good because you can look and watch and enjoy what you like. Then the internet came, okay? There was no more waiting. Whatever you liked, it was there. If you like, Saturday Night Live, you can indulge in that as much as you want. If you like whatever it is. And that's really what podcasts are. Local radio's fine, but there are times where maybe you don't enjoy a particular host or you don't enjoy that topic or, there's a multitude of things. Well, now with podcasting, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir if you're listening to this show, it's on demand. It's what you like. It's so much similar to your Netflixes and the internet as a whole, as opposed to more archaic forms of media and entertainment, that being television, even cable to a lesser extent. You watch what they give you. Cable gives you a broader scope, but you're still watching what they give you as opposed to your Netflixes and your internet and now podcasting. You go where you want. And so if you want to hear Detroit Lions, you want to hear my beautiful voice, you want to hear Doc and Jock and the rest of the crew at Detroit Sports Podcast, well, it's on demand. You can hear us when you want. You don't have to wait. That's the other thing with the radio. Some of your favorite hosts, maybe they play while you're at work. Maybe the morning drive or the drive home don't feature the guys you love. Well, with podcasting, you listen to us when you want, where you want, and it's a beautiful thing. So I've got off my soapbox talking about podcasting, preaching to the choir. Let's talk about this game. I mean, for a minute there, the implode formula or the implode recipe, it was being made. We didn't finish the process, but, we get up to this early lead and it's like, stop me if you think that you've heard this one before, if you think that you've seen this one before. We started giving up the lead, okay, from 21-3, and then they start inching closer and closer and closer. So what is that implode formula you talk about, Jerry? Well, the implode formula or the recipe, it's quite simple, and there are a few key ingredients. Some of those key ingredients include bad tackling. We saw plenty of that. There's sometimes an injury or two that occurs. This week, it was Glover Quinn with the concussion. Ziggy Ansah, hey, send this guy some chicken soup, some ginger, some garlic, Mental-Enthus, Halls, whatever he takes or needs, whatever cold, flu remedies you guys think is appropriate, give the man his fair share, because this was not an injury per se, but he was not on the field for the most part for key stretches due to being sick. And that is also a part of the recipe. Remember, against Green Bay, that recipe being injuries was Michael Ola. Michael Ola got down. He was out. LaAdrian Waddle came in, and then the blocking and the penalties and all the bad things, the blocking issues were ever present. And then the key ingredient. This is like sugar. If you're making a cake or I don't know, whatever you make, there's always that key ingredient that you have to have, and you always see it. And for the implode formula for the Lions, the implode recipe, it's the turnover. Yes, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers getting the ball with only 20 or so yards to go. So we saw it with Amir Abdullah, who we'll be talking about in a second. However, we didn't follow the recipe, and that's what we want to give credit to our boys. Say what you want. It was a good win for me because it's national television. I always like our team looking good and winning. Stafford was, he was dead on, man, with the completion percentage, another trio of touchdowns. Was it 3 or 2? It's late, guys. Okay. It's past midnight. So it's past my bedtime. I don't have the stats in front of me. So, hey, I mess up sometimes with a loaded gun. I don't have all of my ammo today. It was either 3 or 2 touchdowns, well over 200 yards, and the completion percentage was there. So, the good things were there, okay? Eric Ebron, he looked a lot better, and we'll be talking about him in a second. So, it was good to see this. Now, the detractors will say a couple of things. First and foremost, oh, great, now, our draft pick is going to get worse. I've talked about that once. I've talked about that 1,000 times. I'm not that type of guy. I think if you have the right guy, you can make the right pick at number 10 or 11. If you got the wrong guy, you can have the first pick, the second pick. We know that, and it cannot matter. So it's so much more important that you get the right guy, and you want your team to win, okay? You want them to win on the road. You want Stafford to say, hey, I've been at the Superdome and I've won a game. I've been on the road against Drew Brees and I've won, because those things do carry over. And as we said before, we concern ourselves with the 6 or 7 draft picks this year, where we have a roster and a good 30 to 35 guys will return for 2016. So we want to see them to do good. Now, the other detractors will say, well, yeah, okay, we look sharp on offense, but the New Orleans Saints, their defense is horrible. Now, that one does hold some weight. Just looking at the stats, the New Orleans Saints are 31 overall on defense. They're 30th against the pass. They're 32nd against the run. That's ugly, man. We can complain about the Lions, but this defense it has not worked. You've got big contracts. A guy like Jarius Byrd isn't working out. There's a lot of bad going on with the New Orleans Saints, which is why some people think that Mr. Sean Payton will be available. And if time permitting, that's something I would like to talk about and touch on as well. The possibility, you got teams like the Ravens and the Saints continuing to lose. There's a chance, Super Bowl winning coach could be available. So that is what one or two detractors will say. You'll hear that tomorrow on sports radio. You'll see it on your Twitters. You'll see it on the various websites that, the Lions look good, but they went against a bad defense. That is true. There is no denying that. Yet and still, it's a road game. It's Monday Night Football. And you play who's in front of you. How much worse would it have been if the offense struggled against this this defense that has been bad? So, of all the possible outcomes, yes, it is a bad defense, but there are other outcomes. We could have looked mediocre. We could have looked, bad. And we've done that against bad teams and bad defenses before. So I'm not going to sit here and get too naysayery, or however you want to word it, just based on the fact that they played a bad defense. Yes, it was a bad defense. However, there are other alternatives. The offense could have looked bad against a bad defense. So props to the team getting the points. The defense looked good early on. You lose Quinn and Ziggy, and you really just saw a huge drop off, right off the bat. James Ahedebo just, it's so funny. This time last year, he was probably looking and angling for that big fat contract renewal, and he knew why. He wanted that new contract, and this is why he wanted to go ahead and possibly hold out, because I love the guy, nice guy. I've met him, real cool individual, but he probably knew, like, okay, I play way above my head here in 2014. Let me try to get some money, because I might get exposed for being kind of who I've been in my 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the NFL, which is average to below average. So, he's looked bad. He came in for Quinn, did not look that good. Like what the young guys are doing, though. Darius Slay, as always, doing what he does. Lawson, Diggs, Abdul Quddus, all of them looking pretty good as well. So it's encouraging. It's encouraging to see young guys develop. Yes, Amir Abdullah with the fumbles, because player evaluations are really strong at this point. That's all we're playing for. Player evaluations is key. Amir Abdullah looked bad in terms of the fumble, but he did look good. Kick return and running. I'm just hoping that he goes the way of Tiki Barber. He goes the way of Warwick Dunn. These guys, I think even Curtis Martin had an issue. All of these guys struggled with fumbling the ball early in their careers. They changed some things up, not to the where, they lost their style of running, but they changed stuff up just enough to where the fumbles weren't an issue and they were still effective, because Amir Abdullah has a chance to be good, but if the fumbles are just there, no matter how good you are, turning the ball over, especially giving the ball back to New Orleans where they just only have a few yards to get a touchdown, it's inexcusable. So, you like seeing the ups from him. The downs are bad. It is good to see him run the ball effectively like he did, and we want to see more of that. Now, let's get to this. We're going to go ahead and call Chris Gandy. We're going to do a live call. Chris Gandy has his own podcast. Those Detroit guys they're pretty good. So we're going to do this. We're going to go ahead and call him up. And we're gonna get his thoughts on the game. If he picks up the phone, he better pick up this phone, because hey, a game like this, you want to share in the wealth. You don't want to be by your lonesome. You want to enjoy the win with other Lions fans. And I want to ask him about Jim Caldwell. Last time he was on the show, we talked about Caldwell, but it was right after the Philadelphia game, so times were good. We were living high off the hog. So I want to hear from him now that because he's a Caldwell supporter now that we've had a couple of losses. So we're going to go ahead, play a little music here while we dial in and see if we can get a hold of one Mr. Chris Gandy. So this is the part where it gets a little dry. So we're not going to let any dead air hit you. We're going to go ahead, play a little bit of music as we call Chris Gandy. Let's see. What do we got here? Come on, Chris. Pick up the phone, buddy. Chris Gandy, is that you, sir, Mr. Gandy?
What's going on?
What's happening, man? We had to put a little music going on while that phone was ringing. I'm trying not to lose viewers. I'm like, I hope he picks up. What's happening, man? Monday Night Football. Hey, we pulled it off. What's your thoughts on the game, Chris?
Good game. First off, it's a Lions fans Christmas time. I'm excited for Christmas, spend some time with family. Want to see a Lions victory. I'm not on Twitter rooting against my team, putting out the doomsday logic, the doomsday favorite tweets that people like to get these retweets off. Man, I was rooting for my team to win this game, man. So all in all, I thought it was a great game. Lions looked well on offense. Stafford had a great game, and, Calvin didn't get any targets. But, hey, the defense made stops. We made plays. And, hey, a win in my book, man. I'm taking 5 wins on the season. Let's go.
Yep, I'll take it too. Let me ask you about Calvin. You mentioned him, and a lot of people say, well, why isn't Calvin getting the ball? Do you think it's more of he's just not getting open as much anymore, or what's going on? You think they're honestly, Calvin's running by guys and they're not throwing him the ball? Because I'm not quite buying that anymore.
I would need to take a look at the tape, right? I think simply that, there's a couple things here. We've been crying for years and years and years, right? There's this catch-22, right? Throw it up to Calvin. You got to get it to him. And then there's also, why does Stafford only look at Calvin, right? So you have that argument, I feel like, every season, right? This isn't the 2011 Calvin. I looked at the stats. Calvin got 158 targets in 2011, 205 in 2012, and this year he's at 125. So he's definitely behind pace in these big years. But they're spreading the ball around. The offense that Joe Lombardi still got instilled, you still see Jim Bob in there. But I just think they're spreading the ball around. I can't see that Calvin's not getting open. There's a lot of plays, it's you got to look at the game holistically. There's plays where he's not getting open. There's plays where he is open. There's plays where the line's not blocking up. But I think Calvin's game has to change. He has to run a lot more slant, all these deep routes. He might not be blazing by guys, but talking about Calvin Johnson, 6'5", 237. You got to change his route tree. I think those are some things and adjustments that they have to make. And hey, at the end of the day, man, Golden Tate, he's still a baller. We need a third guy to step up. Calvin, we've been begging for that in Detroit. We've wanted more receivers. So to answer your question, has he taken a step back? Yeah, he has. But yeah, I'm tired of this rhetoric going around in Detroit that they need to cut Calvin Johnson in the offseason.
And it doesn't make sense, too. Even from a financial standpoint, yes, you gain some money, but if you cut Calvin, like I've been saying, you're still on the books for $13 million. But on top of being on the books for $13 million, guess what? You still need a number one receiver. And at the very least, you're going to be spending $10 to $12 million for that number one receiver. So $13 million for Calvin, who isn't on your team, plus at least $10 million for whoever you bring in to be your number one receiver. It just doesn't really add up, at least not yet. So, yeah, pretty good analysis there on Calvin. Let me take you away from the Lions just briefly. I'm going to start talking about a little bit of NFL as a whole. Lions is 99% of what we do, but every now and then, if a story arises, we'll talk about it. Panthers, Giants, Odell Beckham Jr. versus...
Great game.
Yeah, it was a good game versus Norman. What were your thoughts on that game, on the Panthers, and specifically Odell Beckham Jr.? We just found out he's got that 1-game suspension, which he is appealing.
Well, first off, I got to throw it out there. MVP Cam Newton, if he doesn't get it, it's just like a Lions player getting screwed out of another fumble. But Odell should have got suspended. He should have got kicked out the game. There's reports that Norman was out there shouting racist slurs homophobic slurs, and just little things, right? It's a chippy football game, but hey, I've never seen a Lions player do that. Receiver, I like to see it. I want to see a receiver get pissed off and fight and fight a guy.
At what point though, man? It cost him a game potentially.
Hey, it sure did, but he also got them that game. They almost won that game. That defense would have held Cam Newton down. We're going to overtime. So, yes, the first half, Odell definitely screwed his team, right? And in the second half, Odell finally stepped up and had 5 receptions. I think it was 70-something yards and a tutty. But I love the fire, but he's got to learn how to play in those big moments. And he's definitely got to learn that you can't let anybody get in your head like that. Norm was clearly in the guy's head. Hey, side note, Lions, if you got a chance, you better pay that man Norman. Bring him to Detroit. I know you love Lawson, but that'd be a hell of a duel.
Yeah, it's probably going to cost so much money, though, man. That's the thing about it. Like, man, who's that bum from Philly? He got like $10 million annually. If he's getting $10 million annually, Norman should get 18. I mean, it's going to be crazy. That's the only thing. And we do have money to spend, but you want to spend that much? But hey, as far as talent goes, he gambled on himself this year, and man, it's paying off. That would be kind of sweet if you could have Slay on one side and Norman on the other. I mean, what do? That would have to be the best cornerback duo. And
then you have Diggs in the slot. That's one thing that I could have dropped the show with when you called me. Contract Diggs has turned into a little bit of a player. I think he's a bright spot in the season. I mean, he had a lot of hype in minicamp in the preseason. Didn't put a lot on the field right away. I think, since he was playing time and just a little getting used to the speed of the game, but last few weeks, man, he's constantly making plays, jarring defenders. Instincts are crazy, good tackler. And that's the thing I love about him the best. He's one of the better tackling corners on our team. Will stick his nose in there, man. Guy from Angleton, Texas, man. Don't let the speed fool you, bro.
Yep. Sometimes a football player is a football player. I mean, Richard Sherman, he's a big guy, but he's not that fast. Diggs doesn't have the speed or the size. But first off, he has the football pedigree, with Quentin Jammer being his brother. It's so funny because Quentin Jammer was a guy where when Joey Harrington was drafted, that was the whole debate. Who are we going to pick with the third overall pick? You hope Julius Peppers falls. Maybe Quentin Jammer. It was a lot of talk about Quentin Jammer. I think Millen it came down to Jammer or Harrington. So it's so funny that, Quentin Jammer was kind of like, it was in the Lions talk for so much, like 15 years ago almost. Fast forward to today, and his baby brother is doing such a good job there in Quandary Dick. So that's a pretty good take. We're going to get back to the Lions, though, in this game specifically. Quinn goes down and Ziggy goes down. I think that's kind of two of the bigger reasons why our defense started to falter. What else did you notice, though, as this game was getting closer and closer? Were you getting worried? Were you noticing things that said, uh-oh, it's happening again?
Of course. What's your thing? Lavender and what's the other one, man?
Lavender and garlic, baby.
Yeah, man. I mean, I was getting a little nervous there but I saw the whole game, right? You look at it and said, okay, when the Lions have the ball, they were just going up and down the field, right? 5 for 5. And you actually heard a pretty nice stat from ESPN and the staff. The Lions are the number 1 offensive team in the red zone. I thought that was a heck of a stat. It's usually one of those, just teams on discipline and those things. I loved it. But Stafford, I got to go Stafford. 0 turnovers, 88%, completion rate. I know you've talked about it. And he did it not finding Calvin, right? I brought it up. Calvin has 6 targets in the last 2 games. Just spreading the ball around. Golden Tate, he's just a baller, man. He's a player. In the defense, I think that Haloti Ngata, too bad he's starting to spark this late in the season, but just a run defender. He's shown what he's worth. Not much in pass defense, but he can get the field on the run. If you don't double team him, he's gonna make you pay for it. So hey, I walk away with the W on the road in New Orleans. Before the game, I called I think a 7-point victory. Even in my weekly picks, I think I called like a 14-point victory. So I was right, but hey, I wasn't confident that the Lions would show up to play this week, and they did. It's Lions letdowns after big losses have been pretty consistent this year, and this was a good bounce back for them.
It was. Now, we got one more question for you. Last time we talked, we were discussing Jim Caldwell, and I think when you were on this show, we either just won in Lambeau or maybe we had won a couple of games. I mean, we were starting to turn things in the right direction. It seemed like, with the changes to the front office, the changes to the offensive coordinator, it was starting to click, and the team was showing that with their record. Now, since then, we've got the 2 bad losses. We're at 9, so the best we can do is 7-9, and that's not a guarantee either. At that point, you were pro Caldwell. You said, hey, this guy deserves another shot. Where do you stand now? Is there a provision? Let's say we lose out and we go 5-11 versus if we go 7-9. Does that change? Or just in general, where are you at with the head coach in terms of if he should be back or not?
It's tough because as a fan, I would say Chris, Gandy, those Detroit guys would say bring him back 3 years. You got to keep a coach in there 3 years. It's a disservice to a quarterback to have to change head coaches and offensive coordinators every year, speaking from a football sense. But from a general manager standpoint and a Lions organization, it's hard to say if he'll come back. I mean, today you saw some of the challenges, right? The Spiller fumble, which wasn't challenged. I thought it was definitely a fumble. Refs didn't call it. Fumble by Tullett wasn't a fumble. We saw it. And then the Watson's out of bounds. I mean, challenge 2, got one that I think should have been thrown, but I don't think Caldwell has had an awful season. I think the team has been handcuffed. I wrote something about this on our website and said this team's handcuffed. All the dead money, $26 million, talking about 3 good players that be lining up on defense, and you're missing one of your stars. I think this year has been definitely a step back, definitely for the Lions. But people would say I'm hanging a lot of excuses, a lot of hooks out there for Caldwell. I think you got to give a coach 3 years. I say you give him another year trial period with this new coach. I don't think any guys are out there to bring in as a Lions head coach. But hey, what do I know? I only see it from my eyes, from my side of the TV, and I think Caldwell deserves another shot.
Good insight, man. Now tell everyone, what you do, where you're at, where you can be found. Give them your Twitter stats, your podcast. This guy's got some good stuff going on. Tell everybody where they can hear more from you, Chris.
Yeah, of course. And as soon as I get off the phone with you, I'm dropping my podcast tonight, Those Detroit Guys podcast. Our website is thosedetroitguys.com. Check us out. Get some good stuff from us. Got a few Don't Doubt Detroit shirts if you look for one for the holiday. But nonetheless, man, Jerry, hey, we're a great tag team, man. Look forward to have you in on episodes sooner than later, my friend.
All right, man. I'm at the turnbuckle. I got my hand out. I'm ready to be tagged in. As always, Chris, thanks for joining us. Check the guy out. He does superb work, and we'll be talking to you soon, man.
All right, brother. Have a good night, man. Happy holidays to everyone out there.
All right, peace. All right, that was Chris Gandy doing what he does. Good insight, and I was real interested to see kind of where he stood with Caldwell, because the last time we talked about Caldwell, there was definitely a feeling like maybe the Lions could bounce back. Maybe 8-8 was in the possibilities, but now that's out of the question. Seems like he still has a a little bit of respect for Mr. Caldwell, saying that potentially, give this guy his third year. Potentially, he can turn things around. Very solid arguments all around. And I love to mention about Quandre Diggs. Nevin Lawson's my guy. Everyone knows that. That's my player. That's my dude. I love what he does. But Diggs is like right there, man. He's like, if it's a 2-foot race, 2-man race between these two guys in terms of the affections of Jerry, Diggs and Lawson are right there. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I got to give a little love to Eric Ebron. I don't do it enough. I try to balance things out. So I have a little comment about him. A little bit that something that he showed me that was impressive. We'll also go around the NFL. I'll give you my take on the whole OBJ versus Mr. Norman, a little bit of draft talk, a little bit of San Francisco talk, and then we'll get out of here. So stay right here as we'll be right back on the Hindsight 20 podcast. Jerry Mallory here, Hindsight 20 podcast. Your ad can be placed right here. Let's do a little business. It's simple. Hindsight20 podcast at gmail.com, the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We only support those who support us, and those are the best companies. So if we're mentioning you and your company in terms of what we do and what we talk about, those that listen to us, they will come running in droves and flocks to spend their hard-earned money on your business. So let's make it happen. Hindsight20 podcast at gmail.com. We are back on the Hindsight 20. No story time for you this week. We're talking about Lions. It's late. We won. So let's talk about the team a little bit more. Before we went into our break, we talked about Eric Ebron briefly. I want to give him credit. He had a really good game. And it's not the totality of what he did or the number of catches. It was the flashes that he's shown. That he showed. That one catch, what was it, about 45, 50 yards. What was impressive was the fact that he outran 2 defensive backs. And this is why you draft a guy like Eric Ebron, for the mismatches. Now, if he's outrunning defensive backs, logic should tell you that a linebacker just can't keep up with him. It hasn't happened yet, but he showed the flashes. I've been waiting to see that speed, and just, more often than not, I haven't seen it. And so, he was known for being just a superb route runner and having the athletic ability. Too big for a defensive back, too fast for a linebacker. We hear that. It's kind of a cliche term with super skilled tight ends. But just to see him outrun 2 defensive backs who were in front of him, to blow by them, it was promising. It was a glimpse. And it's going to take a lot more than that glimpse. One game isn't going to justify things, but a skill set is what you like to see. You'll never see Brandon Pettigrew outrun 2 defensive backs unless I get signed to play defensive back in some weird alternate universe of the NFL. And so, although we need to see more, he showed something that very few tight ends can do. And so that was promising. And for that, I'm going to give him his props. So with the win, they have to do some calculations. Our draft order would be anywhere from 9 to 11. So we've dropped because, we won the game. That advances us past New Orleans by means of a tiebreaker. We would be past the Chicago Bears by means of a tiebreaker, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to give you 3 names of guys that could potentially be there when we're picking in that 9 through 11 range. Now, first off is Vernon Hargreaves. Now, I think the only reason he would be available, we'll just call it in the 10 range, is because of his size. I was talking to a buddy at Pride Detroit, and they're saying Florida scouts they're promising us that this guy is at least 5'10", which isn't that great anyway. But from all accounts, it looks like he's like 5'8", 5'9", very small. He's not a big guy. Size is not where he's going to make his name known. This is a cornerback, from Florida. However, in terms of skill, coverage ability, ball playing ability, being a playmaker, it's all there. And, if he was 2, 3 inches taller, he'd be a top 5 pick, no doubt. And depending on how he does in this combine, he still has a chance to be a top 5 pick. He's that good. Again, it's Vernon Hargreaves. Is it the third out of Florida, cornerback, not the biggest guy, but, Darius Slay, keeps doing what he does. If we bring in a guy like Hargreaves and he produces and becomes what many people think he can be in terms of coverage, it could be a scary duo. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is inside linebacker Reggie Ragland from Alabama. This is the sweet spot for linebackers, especially middle linebackers. Oftentimes, middle linebackers aren't picked early in the draft. They're not top 5 picks. It's a devalued position, especially when you talk about the amount of money you have to give a top 5 pick. Now, outside linebackers, Khalil Mack, Von Miller, they'll get picked up in the top 5. Middle linebackers fall. But what happens usually is if you're picking the first middle linebacker and he pans out, you're getting a phenomenal player that can shape your defense. Look no further than a Patrick Willis, who was picked in the 10 range. Look no further than Luke Kuechly, who was picked in the 10 range. Reggie Ragland has the potential to be a game-shifting type of linebacker. And you can look at that 10th pick and say, wow, we've got the best defensive player in the draft. It's just a devalued position. That's the only reason he'll last to the 10th spot. So this is the inside linebacker. As you know, Stephen Tulloch, not looking that good, getting older, will probably be cut. We have to address this, whether in free agency or the draft. This would be a perfect choice, guys. And the more and more I talk about it, the more I'm leaning toward Reggie Ragland being the guy I want us to pick inside linebacker for Alabama. Now, the third potential guy would have to fall, and it happens. It's Ronnie Stanley, offensive tackle. Now, in the last couple of mock drafts, he's fallen a little bit. I've seen him in the 5 to 10 range. A couple of weeks ago, he was like anywhere from 2 to 3, but he's fallen a little bit. Very good player. And he's kind of scheme dependent, though. This is an offensive tackle. He can play left tackle, and he's out of Notre Dame. He's a zone blocker. And so it really comes down to the system that we run and what our new offensive coordinator wants to do. Now, back when Joe Lombardi was manning the helm at offensive coordinator, it would have been perfect. He's a zone guy, and Ronnie Stanley is probably the best zone blocker, whereas Laramie Tunsil is just the best overall offensive tackle. Stanley, if in the right scheme, if it's a zone type scheme, would be a good fit. And because he is a little bit more so scheme dependent, it's another reason why he could fall in the draft. So a lot of that depends on what the Lions want to do. So 3 names: Vernon Hargreaves, cornerback out of Florida; Reggie Ragland, the guy I'm kind of falling for. The eyes with the hearts are kind of coming and bubbling, and, Cupid's got his arrow, and I got my sights on Mr. Ragland, inside linebacker from Alabama. And then it's Ronnie Stanley, offensive lineman, offensive tackle, left tackle, zone blocking tackle from Notre Dame. And so this is where we're at now. If we win the next 2, things could change once again. You go 7-9, you're probably looking at 15 to 20. If we lose the next 2, we're at 5-11, we'll probably be 7, 8. So, you like you said, cheer for the team to win. If they do lose, things do change, and that will kind of, mix up who is available. But that's how you have to look at it. Now, going around in the NFL briefly, we'll talk about Carolina and the Giants. Odell Beckham, he's a fine player. And there comes a time where, the maturation has to happen for someone. And I'm hoping that's the case for him. I'm a fan. I think he's a good player. What happens is when everything comes so soon and success, and you're on the cover of Madden, you have a catch that is immortalized and will be talked about, forever. You become entitled. You become, you can have a chip on your shoulder, but you kind of lose it. And you kind of you think everything's supposed to come your way. It's almost like a baby throwing a fit because he wants his way. And that's kind of what happened, I think, with him and Josh Norman. Supposedly, Josh Norman had some disparaging remarks. There have been rumors about Odell Beckham Jr.'s sexual orientation, yada, yada, yada. Some will even say it's why he fell in the draft. Whatever. We don't know if that's true or not. No matter what someone says, though, and it's easier said than done. Trust me, I know. When it comes to the field of play, you have to navigate because, they're still in the race for the NFC East, and now he might not play a game. You're costing yourself a game check. You're costing your team, an opportunity to potentially advance, without having you their win probability drops so much. So, it just kind of reminds me of a baby throwing a tantrum, of someone that has been entitled because so much has been given to him so quick from his rookie year to this year. And I hope it's a wake-up call. I hope this isn't a continuing thing. You just want to see him continue to grow on the field, off the field, and mature. And about Carolina, I mean, they're just doing things the right way, man. You could talk about the defense. Now they're starting to score. Ted Ginn Jr. has been resurrected, man. This guy, he was, drafted from the Miami Dolphins. That didn't do much. Cam Newton's getting it done. If you look at his receiving core, Funches has been hurt, a time or two. His main target, Kelvin Benjamin, has been out for the whole year with the ACL. Yes, as Chris Gandy said, this guy is the MVP. It looks like they have a great shot at doing the undefeated thing now. They're running the ball great. The defense is great. What else can you say about the team? I'm cheering for them. I'm rooting for the success. You want to see good things happen for them because they're building their team through the draft, and they're building their team the right way. And hey, Ron Rivera has been on that side where Jim Caldwell is almost out the door. They gave him one more shot, and they're turning things around. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers before we get out of here. It's the last home game. It's bittersweet, man. I've had a good time at Ford Field this year. This is my first year with season tickets. I've really enjoyed myself. Would like to see more wins, but we have an opportunity with this win to go 4-4. I'm just kind of recollecting and jogging back my memory. I think that would be 4-4 at home. We've had wins against Chicago, win against Philly, win against Oakland. So yeah, we have a chance to do 500 with the win. San Francisco's not a good team. As we know, the record indicates as much. They're 27th overall in defense, 26th against the pass, 27 against the run. They're 32nd, dead last, okay? Doesn't get any worse than that. 32 teams in the league. They're 32nd in offense, 30th in terms of the pass, 23rd against the run. It's sad when Blaine Gabbert is an upgrade from anybody. It just speaks of how bad Colin Kaepernick has looked the last couple of years. It's so weird. 2 years ago, man, this team was a juggernaut. They were headed up with this battle with Seattle, and so much has changed. You know what happened in their offseason, but I'm just gonna relive it. Now, they lost some free agents: Michael Crabtree, Frank Gore, Mike Iupati, Chris Culliver. Those hurt. They wanted to keep some of them, but what happened that was even worse is the guys that just outright lost, that just retired. Jim Harbaugh leaving, great coach. Say what you want about him, going to Michigan. It was kind of a mutual thing, no doubt, but you knew it was going to be a step back, more than likely, unless they brought in someone that could be his heir apparent. And, as of right now, Tom Marsula? Every time I hear his name, I think I want like a chicken marsala. Tom, what the heck is it? I can't even think of his name. And so he's not going to be the heir apparent. I just don't think he has it. But what really hurt this team was the guys that just up and retired. Okay, Justice Smith retired, long NFL career, older guy. It hurts, but okay, whatever. Alden Smith goes crazy. They have to cut him, let him loose. He's doing this thing in Oakland now. So, those are two dynamite guys that were just like the key for their defensive line. Then Patrick Willis retires in the middle of his career, in his prime. Very weird. Okay, well, it hurts, but we've got Chris Borland, this guy, when Willis was hurt, really stepped in. He's even younger. He retires. Then Anthony Davis, 25 years old, offensive tackle, he retires. I don't think I've seen a worse offseason for a team. To lose your coach, to lose all of these guys, these surprise retirements, and not really coming with the replacements. The writing was on the wall for them to really struggle this year. They've stringed a couple of wins. They have looked better with Blaine Gabbert. I think the Lions will be inspired. It's their last home game. The crowd, will it be a sellout? Technically, probably so. I'm expecting to see plenty of empty seats, but those that will be there, including myself, will be rooting them on. It's the last one of the year. It's been a tough year, but we've battled it out together. And so I'm picking us to win this game. You look at this team, they stumble on offense and defense, the 49ers do. So I think we'll put up some points against them. Final score, 31 for Detroit and a measly 14 for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I've been wrong so much. When I pick us to win, we lose. When I pick us to lose, we win. So if we go ahead and find a way to lose this game, don't blame me, but just know to not trust what I say, because I've been wrong a time or two or 12. Monday Night Football in the books, guys. It's late. We've had a good time. I don't care who you are or how you root or whatever. If you're a real Lions fan, even if you look at draft picks and the potential of keeping guys you don't want, somewhere deep down in your heart, to quote a famous YouTube video, you want your team to win. It's always a good day when the Lions win. We'll be back. This was a Tuesday show. We'll be back next Monday as we'll be recapping the home finale, San Francisco versus Detroit. As always, Jerry Mallory NFL on Twitter. DetroitSportsPodcast.com is where I can be found in the whole gang. It's a wonderful network. Hindsight 20 podcast at gmail.com. If you want an ad, if you want to talk or ask a question, whatever you want to do. I'm also on PrivateDetroit.com, a video contributor. Thank each and every one of you, as I always do. It's been a blast. We've been having fun. It's going to get so much better in the off season. The best is yet to come. We'll be back Monday, so 6 days away from the next show. And until then, thanks for listening.